Okay, so as I announced last time, we are recording the Q&As this year, but if you want to turn off the recording for the purposes of the Q or the A, then it's up to you.
But will we pause it? Like, it'll just be an NR.
Yeah, we could do that also. That's true. The other thing also is we can either do we either start with your questions, and then remember we have the Kiruv questions that I was sent. The 10 questions that I'm supposed to answer in 4 sentences or less, which we could talk about. So anyone have any, yeah, Isaac.
Yeah, so there's a question.
Hold on just a second. I can't hear you, but I think that's me. Try again.
Okay, so this is a question that I've been thinking about for a bit. So there's lots of psukim in the last several parshios that talk about like the good things that'll happen if if we keep mitzvahs.
Yeah.
So I actually have 2 questions about this, but I'm just gonna ask one for now. I'd say some of them seem to be like Mishlei type, schar that you would get, where like, if you, let's say, are honest in business, you'll be extremely successful.
Yeah.
Things like that. I some of them seem to be like very like, I don't know if it's like hashgachic exactly, but like, but like things like, you won't have any there won't be anyone who's barren,
Right.
So what's like the right way to understand like or like how that works in like a Sparvonish way?
That's a good question. No clue. Next question. Yeah, no, I really don't know. I mean, it seems, I mean, I'll tell you what I do like in reading it is like, I think I conceive of it in your approach is like, the ones that are Mishleic, like then, you understand the cause and effect of how it works. And then that's like, doesn't at all detract from Chachmas Hashem, like that, the fact that the world is designed in a way where if you follow justice and chesed and mishpat, then like your life is going to be better. That's like, if anything, is going to enhance your appreciation of Hashem. And then the other ones were like, yeah, if there's not going to be any barren women, that does seem to be like hashgacha pratis. So like, and that is a phenomenon that when, that God will minimize chance occurrences that are negative for you, I don't know what else to do with it other than that.
Okay.
There is, though, I'll say just while we're at it, there is an opposite thing with the klalos that I think there are 2 separate ways to learn the klalos, is that either it is hester panim of like withdrawal of hashgacha, and then everything that's described in the psukim is what will naturally befall you. And then there are others, I think, who learn that it's like a for lack of a better term, like a negative hashgacha, like that is like al derech tochacha, like that God will bring about certain specific calamities, for specific tshuva purposes. I don't want to call it anti-hashgacha. That's a little confusing, isn't it?
Because that means there'd be like a lack of hashgacha.
Yeah.
Isn't it just like type of hashgacha?
Yeah, it's a type of hashgacha. Yeah, hashgacha letochacha, I think, is the use that the Rambam has for it. Yeah, because
I'm just waiting. Once I can ask a question.
No, sure. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I couldn't hear what he was saying at all though. So like if he's about to ask a question. Then,
because I was about to ask a question. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't hear him.
Oh, I said it. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear him now? I wonder if this is not. It's going through the snowball.
Wait, it's not connected to the microphone on the speaker.
Yeah.
Go to the options over there.
Shmuel said he can hear him.
That's speaker. That's how we hear it. But microphone is blue snowball. Yeah. Shmuel says he could hear. All right. This is the same setup as always, I think. Yeah. I'll repeat it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, okay.
Or is the snowball in a different setting?
All right, so
I put it on the
say
quick
more
setting.
concisely than me, I guess. So this is kind of going off of Rav Pesach Shir last Sunday.
Shir or the Q&A? Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, this morning Shir. And like one of the takeaway conversations that I kind of asked him, but I didn't fully get an answer on was, okay, so the implication that one, if you were to say that Hashem, it's really through us or whatever, that Hashem's his chesed is being, or like his rachmanis is being given to the animals or whatever. Like that's not good. That's not an idea. Like that's not a right idea, because now we're giving like an emotional motivation or whatever to Hashem. So that follows.
Okay, I'm not agreeing fully. I'm acknowledging, because that was a very subtle point in the shir in terms of just to give like a quick, the saying that God's chesed comes from like an emotional source would definitely be bad. But then saying that like we are what do you call, like let's say like charged with certain responsibilities to like care for the animals, that's not that's not okay. Yeah.
No, I mean specifically that we're like shliachs in the emotional motivation sense.
Right. Yeah, that was bad. Yeah.
So then that seemed to imply to me, which is apparently I think what Corn Rock case like it does, that while we at the moment need to relate emotionally in these mitzvahs, that the goal is to actually do it from like a higher place of just Rahmanis in that case, but not emotional like motivation.
I don't think that was the implication.
Mercy, not a.
Well, I mean,
In other words, what he was objecting to before was saying
no, that's what I asked him after.
That's what you asked him. Okay, fine. Yeah.
And maybe this is a question I have to follow up with him more clearly, but because he basically pretty much said, well, right, the truth is, I don't know if it's the Rambam or what, but I think it's the Rambam that ultimately the highest way to relate to emotions is really, or to the mitzvah, is purely like an intellect and not because of like the emotional thing that you feel through them.
I don't agree with that.
Okay, so yeah. I didn't, and again, I don't want to put him like, because maybe I didn't understand.
Yeah.
But so kind of then to ask my own question, I asked him, if we're supposed to, are we not supposed to ultimately try to carry out the mitzvahs in sort of capturing, if Hashem doesn't relate to them through like an emotional way that we do, are we supposed to say it's good that we relate to them emotionally, even if that's not how Hashem does it, and we should strive for that, an emotional, like human maximum on it? Or is it to be like Hashem ultimately, to like, maybe it's not emotional, but like a higher emotional sense? Like what exactly, because there's a difference clearly in the way Hashem has the midah, however you want to call that, we're not like personifying him, but he has some obvious trait of Rahmanis, but it's not emotional like ours.
Right.
Do we aspire to that, or do we just say no? It's a human that we can't do that kind of thing?
Okay, that's a good question. Isaac, did you hear any of that? Yeah. Okay. All right. Good.
Yeah.
So that means that the recording heard it also, so I don't have to repeat it. Okay. So
it's totally audible.
Okay. Good. So why is this highlighted?
Hopefully, I asked it well.
Yeah. So I'm going to rephrase it and just tell me if I'm missing any nuance here, which is that Hashem doesn't have emotions. So we only describe his actions as merciful, kind, or whatever, because we're using human analogies. So when Hashem commands us to do an action of mercy, let's say, right? So we do have emotions, and it's natural for us to feel mercy. Is the goal, though, for us to do it with feelings of mercy, or to like do it purely based on intellect? Because seemingly doing it purely based on intellect would be closer to what Hashem is, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And one other subtle thing, intuitively, it would almost at the same time feel like a contradiction of what mercy is, because the only way we currently know mercy from a human point is from an emotionally based perspective. Right.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I'm going to answer this from two perspectives, which is the same answer though. One is from Kedoshim Tihiyu. So it says, Daber al bnei Yisrael v'amarta aleim kadoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokeichem. So this is in Vayikra 19:2, which is speak to bnei Yisrael and tell them you should be kadoshim, because I Hashem am your God am kadosh. Right. So there's a problem here, right? Because what does it mean that Hashem is kadosh?
Separated from everything.
Right, separated from everything, transcends physicality. Right. So how can we at all have a kedusha that is like all like Hashem's? What do you mean?
I mean, I was like half kidding, but now that I think about it more, it's like it's true. Like we have to separate ourselves from in this world from things that are not, kadosh.
Oh, like what?
Aren't like eating chazer.
Well, what's not kadosh about that?
Well,
Okay, fine. Maybe doing things that's not like, I don't know.
What is kedusha? I guess is the question I'm asking. So,
designation.
right. So, but it's not arbitrary separation, right? It's not just you should separate from stuff, right? So it's a certain kind of separation, right?
Separating from the physical?
Yeah, separating from the physical, right? So that's why when we say Hashem is Hakel HaKadosh, he's completely separate from the physical. So does that mean? So I'm kind of like filtering your question through the pasuk. Does that mean that when we are kadosh, it means that we have to be physical, like separated from all of our physicality, right?
Well, that would be probably.
That'd be a problem, right?
Totally do that.
Because you're a physical being,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So the the Rambam in Hillel Deos like says that is a bad derech. He says that
From physical?
yeah, Shem. So this is in the beginning of Deos Gimel Aleph. Shema Yomer Adam. Maybe a person will say, "Hoyel v'hatayva v'kavod v'kiyotim hen derech ra'ahin." Maybe since lust and desire and honor and everything like that is a bad path. Motzinas Adam in Olam, and it removes a person from the world. Efresh mehem biyoser v'esrachik l'tzad achron. I will separate from them exceedingly and distance myself to the other extreme away from physicality. Ach lo yochel basar, where I won't eat meat. V'lo yishteh yain, and won't drink wine. V'lo yiseh isha, and won't get married. V'lo yishev dira na'eh, and won't live in a nice house. V'lo yilbash malbush na'eh, and not dress in nice clothing, just in a harsh wool and sackcloth, right? Like the Catholic priests. Gamzo derech ra'ahi. That's also an evil path of asur leilach ba, and it's asur to go on that path. Violation of kedusha. No. L'chaim.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, not thank you. Yes.
Yes.
Think about that.
To Hashem. Thank you, Hashem. Yeah. If you follow this path of like asceticism, right, separating from the physical, nikrachote, you're called a sinner. Harehu omer ben Nazir, it says by the Nazir, v'chiper alav me'asher chata al nefesh. The Nazir, there's a famous shot of the Rambam. The Nazir has to have kapara for sinning against his soul, right? Amru chachamim, the chachamim say, Uma im Nazir shlo pirish elamin hayayin sarach kapara. If the Nazir who are only separated from wine requires kapara, hamonea atmo mikol davar al achas kama v'kama. All the more so if you separate yourself from everything. One more paragraph. Lefikach tzivu chachamim. Therefore, the Chachamim advised us to only refrain from things that the Torah withheld from us. And you should not prohibit things to yourself that are mutter with nadarim and shvuos. The Chachamim say, is it not enough with the Torah prohibited to you that you have to like usher other stuff to yourself? Oh, sorry, one more. Same thing with people who fast all the time. That's not good. The Chachamim prohibited a person from afflicting himself with fasting. That's what Shlomo says, don't be too much of a tzaddik and don't be exceedingly wise. Why should you make yourself desolate? Right. So that's talking about like self-deprivation. Now, obviously, there are statements on the other side about like when you should use Nadarim in service of Kedusha. But the general thing is he's saying is like there's no ideal of completely separating from the physical because we're physical. So what doesn't mean that you should be Kadosh like Hashem is Kadosh?
To a certain degree, like in the way that the mitzvahs allow.
Okay. So one approach, which is actually more in line with the Rambam, I think, is there's a moderation. Right, is it to a certain degree, right? Not to the extreme on one side of indulgence and not to the extreme of asceticism, but in the middle, okay? My understanding of this pasuk is, I don't know if I'm projecting this onto the Sforno or not, but I'll read it and you'll tell me. Amar ata she'akavana b'chol ela ha'azharos hi shiyu kadoshim. So all the mitzvos in Kadosh, Parshas Kadoshim are telling you should be kadosh. V'zeh k'dei sheyidme l'yotram k'fi ha'efshar. That you should make yourself resemble the Creator insofar as that's possible. Like it says in the creation of man, it says, let us make man in our form like our likeness. And if you go to Sforno's pshat on that, he says, what does it mean? B'tsamenu is true etzem nitzchi v'sichli, that man, I think Sforno learns that it's not Tselem Elohim, it's Tselem Elohim, that it's in the image, it's in the form of angels. Okay, I believe.
Like based on the God, like the like angels are like half like men and half like God or something.
I don't think so. I think it's just based on the word Elohim, or in Torah can mean God or angels, right? I think. Let's yeah.
Wouldn't it be a heretical idea to say they're half God in any way, because then now you're giving them some divine element that we try to say we don't say like they have a piece of God.
Yeah, I read that. I gotta try to be what do you call not make exceptions this year. That if the greatest Zoom annoyance for me is reading chat, I can't indulge people by reading the chat. So if you have something to say, you can say it, unless your mic is broken. So I'm going to ignore the chat. Okay. But sorry. But or text it to someone else and have them read it if you don't want to read it.
As a text me.
Okay. B'tzalmenu. So what does he say? B'tzalmenu. Shu etzem nitzchi v'sechli. So tselem Elohim refers to an essence that is eternal and rational. So that's your telling Elohim. And then he says, Pesach b'Torah, so liknos yediyah ba'atzamim u'migdalim b'yediyas nafshenu. Okay, so that gives us an opening that says that God is in favor of like us gaining knowledge by knowing ourselves. Okay, then he says kidmusenu. I know this sounds like I'm going off track, but I think this is necessary. Kidmusenu is binyan hamasios. So what does it mean, like God's likeness, or like the likeness of the angels? Binyan hamasios, in actions, our actions somewhat resemble the angels. Okay, how so? Because they act with knowledge and discernment. However, their actions are not free, right? Angels don't have free will, according to Plain Shot. Ask me the story about the destroying the tapes from Rabbi Schwartz later on. This is a thing that happened in the first year in yeshiva. All right, and in that sense, man is not similar to them. And in a certain sense, man is similar to God, who acts with bechira. Right, God has free will. However, God's bechira is only for good. But not man's bechira. God's free will is on a higher level than man's free will, because God's free will is that he can do whatever he wants, but it's always good. Man's free will stems from the dual nature, right, of the animalistic and the intellect. That's why it says kidmusenu, like our likeness. Velo bidmusenu, and not in our likeness. That we are bitzelem Elohim. We do have an essence that is rational and eternal, that is equal to the angels, but then we are only partially like the angels and partially like God. We're partially like the angels because we act with knowledge, but they don't have free will and we do. And we're partially like God in that we have free will, but his free will is always for good. Okay.
It's a strange concept of God's free will.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that we're not going to dwell on. And then just one more thing here. He says, so then in the passage it says God created man b'tzelem Elohim. Hine milos Elohim al tzad ha'idamus tomar al kol etzem sichli befoal shalim nivdal mechomer ubezehu nitzki behachreach. So Elohim, the word Elohim indicates any essence which is rational and actual and perfected, and separate from matter, and therefore it is necessarily eternal. And then he goes and explains a more in-depth thing. He goes, why am I bringing this in? So now we go back to Sforno, and he says you should be as kadosh, you should be as resembling the creator as much as possible, based on that definition. My understanding of that means basically that you should develop your Tzelem Elohim as much as possible, to have knowledge, and that should be in line with God's knowledge as much as possible. Okay. But the thing is in free will, your actions should stem as much from free will as possible as well, but human free will, right? You can't have divine free will. And what this means practically is to be kadosh means that you have emotions, but the emotions are not calling the shots. Okay. In other words, you are making decisions based on your mind, and not allowing it to be influenced by your emotions. Okay, so that's half of the question. But the question is, so what do you do with the emotions, right? Do you just like get rid of them? Should they have no influence at all? Yeah.
Is it not being influenced by the emotions, not being influenced negatively by the emotions?
I would say it's not making decisions based on the emotions. Okay, but and
There's
I'm,
still an emotional like part of you that's still like.
so that's what I'm trying to answer now, which is I'll just say it now before I read it in the Rambam, is your emotions should be in line with what your intellect dictates as much as possible. So in other words, if your intellect tells you to be merciful, it would be a lack if your emotions were just like not feeling anything. But if your emotions are in line with that and you feel the mercy, then that is the ideal. In other words, that you should be mercy and how to be merciful should come from your intellect, but your emotions should go in line with that. And Isaac will have to correct me on this if we got it wrong, but we spent a long time in 2021, early 2021 on Hilchos Deos in the Rambam, that he says, you should emulate God's ways. And the question was like, should you actually try to cultivate emotions that like lend themselves, that match up with these mitos? And I believe we said that the answer is yes. I forgot all the proofs that we got.
Yeah, that's what the mitzvah of the halacha b'drachav is. Is specifically that.
Oh yeah, and let me just read the one thing that I do remember, and this is in the Rambam's formulation here. So what does it mean by halachta b'drachav? You should walk in his ways. Kach lamdu b'ferish mitzvah. This is what they taught in this mitzvah. Mahu nikra chanun afata heye chanun. Just as God is called merciful, gracious, so too you should be gracious. Now God is not actually gracious, because gracious is a midah, that's an emotion, but he's called gracious, so too you should be gracious. Mahu nikra rachum, just as God is called merciful, he's not actually merciful because God has no qualities, so too afata hayeh rachum, so too you should be merciful. Mahu nikra kadosh, afata hayeh kadosh, yeah.
I was going to say that, but the way, maybe for me like a mnemonic, but to say that we have midos, but essentially Hashem doesn't, because the word midah, it's like it implies a part of something, not like
right
whole.
That's a good shot on that. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify one of the things.
Sure. Chizkiyahu, then Isaac, then Ariel. Yeah.
Mine's a new question.
Okay.
So I guess whenever.
Sure.
Okay,
And we'll wrap this up soon. Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, so this one seems pretty simple. So the reason that your emotions should be I guess triggered by the intellectual thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
Is and if there was the lack, it would show there was a lack in the intellectual understanding. Right?
Yes. Yeah. That's an important point. In other words, we hold that that the type of knowledge that is valuable is not just intellectual abstract knowledge, but knowledge that affects you.
Right.
That affects the entire organism. Yeah.
Okay. Second, so if we're supposed to be like both the angels and God in this idea.
Yeah.
And the angels act on intellect, which is not my real question, which that Hashem, I thought Hashem did as well, but that's not, but whatever, it's a separate question. Is there a whole lack of Bekius coming from the fact that they have so much knowledge and intellect, there's no space for that conflict, and whereas that turmoil that you mentioned, or like the conflict between our animal nature and our human, essentially just a way of describing the impact of non-total knowledge.
So I think the reason why they don't have Bekius is they don't have a dual nature. They're pure intellect,
right?
And just like animals are pure instinct, and therefore there is no, in order to really have Bekius, you have to have like two forces at war, and two options. And human beings are the only creatures in the universe that we're told about, at least that a conspiracy meme, or aliens, History Channel, but that we're the only creatures that have a dual nature. So it's not that they have so much knowledge that it like overwhelms their Bekius. It's that they don't have anything fighting back. What you did describe, though, would be a description of Moshe Rabbeinu, okay, where the Rambam says that Moshe Rabbeinu got to the level where he was like a malach. So for Moshe has a physicality. It's just that for him, the knowledge is so overwhelmingly prominent that it like it's almost like he doesn't have Bekius. I mean, of course he does.
So that animal instinct doesn't imply, it's not wanting something that, I guess the thing that confuses me is why, even if you do have two natures, why should they necessarily disagree? Why should the animal nature want anything different than with the divine nature, whatever? Yeah. That, unless it's because it doesn't, I just don't want to get caught on the word.
Listen.
Then because it just doesn't know which your divine nature does.
So that's Mishlei's theory, is that and I read this in my Pirkei Avos shir last night, that your emotions would really want all the stuff that your intellect is telling it to want, because your intellect knows what's best for your emotions,
Right.
but your emotions just are not able to listen to your
Correct.
intellect, which is why Mishlei talks to the emotions in languages that they can understand
Yeah,
and shows them that it's in their best interest to to
So
do
you,
this. Yeah.
So you described the parts and the process, but
Yeah.
to me, it sounds like it ultimately does end up saying, well, then it's because this part of you doesn't know as much as your intellect.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
then it is kind of like, in a certain sense, you are overwhelmed by the lack of, we're underwhelmed by our lack of knowledge, and they're overwhelmed by their complete.
But overwhelmed implies to me a quantitative
a-
reason, but they don't have the component that
It
wouldn't
needs to
even.
be overwhelmed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Isaac.
Yeah. So just when you're saying emotions being in line with the intellect,
Yeah.
it took me a while before I like, understood what that phrase meant. It means like I've heard a lot of different saying. I think it's can be a little confusing. It means that what the emotions are driving a person towards is
Yeah.
the same thing that the intellect is saying is a good thing to do.
Yeah, that's
Right.
good. That clarifies it. Yeah. I just want to say one thing before we go into Ariel's question, which is just a methodology point in Q&As. Okay, so there's two styles of answering questions in Q&As. One is the short and sweet answer, and the other is the substantiated evidence-based answer. Okay, and there are different circumstances that call for different things. Like obviously, when I'm going to be doing the whole cure thing in the 4 sentences, I'm not going to be answering these questions, by bringing rise and stuff. But I do think that for especially for like yeshiva guys, and especially for yeshiva guys who envision themselves teaching in some capacity, like whether it is formally being a teacher, whether it's like being a leader, whether it's like parenting, you really need to know like not just what I think the answers are, but you need to see it from the actual like Masorah and the actual, sources, because there are so many guys who float through yeshiva and like they get programmed to think of certain ideas. And if you ask if they're challenged at all, like, how do you know that? Like they'll say like, oh, Rabbi so-and-so said, and then that's just not intelligent. Like that's good for starting off, maybe, but like you should be able to see. That's why I was aware when you asked this question that I'm going to be taking us on what feels like a detour, because I'm delving into psukim and mefarshim. But I think it is it's very easy to slip into you can slip into dogma anywhere, and just like accept things because like people say them. And like, the goal is to via data hayom b'hashavos el levavecha. You should know and then take it to heart, not just like skip the knowing part, So that's why I feel like just knowing like some basis of it, of like kedoshim to you, what is kedusha, who says that this is what kedusha means, who says that asceticism is bad, so like I don't always take this route, but I feel like it's yeah. And I also feel like this is like just because I've done a lot of Q&As in high school, and I can't really afford to do this in high school because they're not really on the level to like appreciate all that stuff. I feel like this is appropriate for here. So even though we're going to get to fewer questions, so
Also, like,
yeah.
like something that touches on like a lot of like Ikarim, like
Yeah.
in a sense as well. So like
Yeah, 100%. Especially in the Ikarim, correctly. Especially in the Ikarim, it's important.
So
Yeah.
on the methodology, before I ask the
Sure.
question, is there a methodology in how to ask a question?
Yes. Yeah. So we the best illustration of this. So the question is like, what makes a good question, right? Yeah. So to me, the easiest way to explain this is with the model from the Haggadah, right? So the Ben Chacham says, "Maha edus v'achukim v'mishpatim asher tiva Hashem Elokeinu eschem," right? What are the testimonies, the statutes, and decrees that Hashem your God commanded you, or Hashem our God commanded you? And then the Ben Tam says, "Mazos." What is this, right? Now, so what makes the Ben Chacham's question better than the Ben Tam's question? It's defined and more specific. So what makes that better, though?
Well, it's a more pointed, directed question.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So why is that better?
Because when someone says, "What is this?"
Yeah.
There's lots of different aspects they could be confused about. They could be saying, what procedurally are we about to do? They could be saying, what's like the ultimate philosophical reason? They could, and like anything in between.
Okay. So that is something that I think, there's definitely a communication difficulty when they're asking the question that you don't know what they're asking about. But let's say in the mind, mazos, right? And let's say Yeah. So like, what makes the specificity better? Yeah, you were saying.
Well, the specificity makes it better because you know exactly what to tackle versus
Okay,
you
yeah.
have like, oh, what's this?
Right.
But what's what?
Okay, so what makes it better is, so here, I think this is the definition here, is there are two ways to evaluate the question. One is if you're judging the question by like the motive, so then they could be equal questions. Like the Ben Chacham and the Ben Tam both want knowledge, right? But to my mind, what makes a question a good question, a question is a tool for arriving at knowledge. And it's a better tool if you take everything you know, incorporate it into the question and pinpoint exactly what knowledge you're lacking, okay? And the two examples I like of this, one is from Shir from Rebbe, I don't remember which tape, is he says that there's some place where Aristotle is talking about like parents and offspring, and he says that he witnessed this case where like you had like a Caucasian parent, and then they had a black offspring, and then the black offspring had a Caucasian kid, right? So the Ben Tam would say mazos, right? But Aristotle said, where is the whiteness in the black generation, right? Because he knew that somehow there must be whiteness in that black kid in order to produce a white kid. And he knew that the black kid came from a white parent, so there must be whiteness in there somewhere, right? So even though Aristotle was like thousands of years before the discovery of genetics, his question like pointed to exactly what that is.
It had some knowledge in the question.
Yeah, he incorporates the knowledge into the question. And the other example I really like is from Rabbi Marshall Gisser, where he said, and I like this example because it's amusing that no one would actually ask this. So your friend drives, you see your friend's taking Uber home instead of his car. You're like, what happened? And he said, oh, I got a flat tire, So, or let's say you see the flat tire and you're like, what happened? That's not a good question, right? Because you know what happened. The tire got punctured, let's say, right? And you know what punctures tires is that if you run over something sharp, So the real question should be, what sharp object did you run over that punctured your tire? Okay. So like that's a more precise question because it points you to the knowledge. Now, here's the thing though, you'll notice when we list our questions in Mishlei, sometimes I favor the more specific question, but sometimes I favor the broader question. And that's a matter of intuition because what's the downfall? What's the detriment of a specific question?
You trap yourself in a specific way.
Yeah, you trap yourself in a specific way of thinking, right? So many times people don't see the answer because they have a specific answer. They think they know what the answer is going to look like, and they're looking at it through like this narrow lens, and they miss out on stuff. And this is the famous. I say famous because like it was quoted a lot in my day, but because I quoted it a lot. is the Rabbi Moskowitz would always say that there's this one sukkah where like the guy, everyone was in New Hampshire and like everyone was learning with Rebbe, and like they had this question and like, all the guys gave all these bad svaras, and then Rebbe like came up with a good svara, right? And so Rabbi Moskowitz, was always interested in methodology, went up to Rebbe and said, how come you got the answer and none of the other guys did? And what? Yeah, so what Rebbe said is he said, they were all trying to find answers and I was just thinking about the question, And I think part of that is, that specificity or anything like I know exactly what I'm looking for could close you off to bigger answers. Or another anecdote, like I might be mixing up two. Oh no,
Oppenheimer, or who was that famous scientist who said I should have spent more time on the question of the atom bomb or something?
Sounds like Oppenheimer, yeah. Could be. Another moment, a time in Shir, there was this time when we got, when I was in Rapezak Shir, when we got a bunch of students from a specific place that they really, really thought that they knew how to learn, and like, so when we were, going over the svaras, or when we were trying to come up with the svara, like they kept on like Rapezak was saying a svara, and they were trying to like cram it into pre-existing brisker categories. And Rapezak like finally said, like, guys, sometimes an idea is a new idea, like it's not all just old ideas in your old categories, So yeah, okay, yeah.
A question on the broad versus specifics. And
yeah.
How do you know when to broaden it?
So I think that is a matter of intuition. I think it is. I think that when you're starting off in learning, then the more specific you can make your question, the better, because it promotes the habit of clarity. And I think people start off not being clear, and that's one of the biggest obstacles to like development and learning. So clarity is good. Yeah. And then like then you kind of like it is like a pendulum in a sense that like you got to go from unclarity to clarity, but then the clarity becomes the inhibitory force of specificity and narrowness of thinking, and then you got to broaden your mind, and be able to like ask the big questions and to not be confined by small things, and so you're going back and forth a lot, but and also in the area like let's say like in Mishlei, I happen to know like what questions are good questions that will lead to good ideas in Mishlei. So I have like a honed intuition. But you ask me something like, let's say a Pirkei Avos. Like I still feel new in Pirkei Avos. I don't exactly have as clear of an idea of what a Pirkei Avos svara is to be able to know which questions are going to like lead to that. I don't have a derech in Pirkei Avos yet, and I'm somewhere in the middle until then. Yeah.
Yeah. No, the truth is I've been using the Mishlei style question to like I wrote a 5-page. Document from my boss. Like I think these are all the questions you should ask.
Yeah, it's really good. And again, I said this in the sheer description, but like, and this is really every Monday night. But I feel like this past Monday night, like the efficiency with which that Monday night group asked all the right questions, specifically and precisely, it was just a masterful thing to watch because everyone like progressed and they were asking the questions.
So asking new questions.
New question, yeah.
All right, so this might be a 3-part question. Okay, so I met.
Yeah,
it should be quick.
Okay, yeah.
So I met someone this past week who she's very big into like Hishtadlus.
Yeah.
God, garbage stuff.
What?
Let me explain.
Okay.
That's a hook. Okay. I don't need that. But,
I was listening to you anyway. I didn't need to.
Okay, so what I'm gonna say is,
extra listening.
I because I met her at a real estate networking event, and she wants to like be successful in real estate.
Yeah.
I said, okay, well, what's your plan? And she's like, no, I'm just going with the flow. God's gonna come down and help.
Okay, that kind of Hishtadlus.
So I'm like, so here's the 2-part question. One is, I think she may have a wrong idea of what Hishtadlus means, and at what point do you say to yourself, okay, it's over, I've done everything I can, because I don't think she has that.
Yeah.
That's one. 2, am I correct in that thinking?
Okay.
that's a
Yeah.
Because that's what I think. At a certain point, you do what you can.
Yeah.
And the 3rd part question is, how do I convey that message with her without being a jerk?
Or do you convey the message?
Or do I?
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, those are good questions. Yeah, right. So let me be down the cops of Hus on Ariel's statement of Hishtadlus God garbage and explain what he meant.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So I still have yet to track down the phrase Hishtadlus, the way that people use it now. I don't know who the first person is to use that. Okay.
Effort, right?
Yeah, Hishtadlus literally means effort or striving, right? So I don't know where this comes from, but I'm just going to state the way that I have heard it used and contrast it with my understanding of how like hashgacha actually works. My limited understanding of how hashgacha works, because I think the way that people relate to Hishtadlus is almost like an A for effort type thing. Okay, that if you go like that and God sees you trying, then he'll step in and be like, okay, pat, A for effort.
That's why
Right. So the thing that I think is destructive about that is I think what it encourages. What?
No, there was a muscle that we were always told, like you have to climb 100 floors, right? The king and
Right.
everybody. So like the guys are going, he's going, blah, blah. Long story short, the guy gets to like the 10th floor, like that's the floor that he gets to, like everyone else got there, and then the elevator door opens. And then it's all the way to the top.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, these mashalim that people give, like there might be true ways to understand it, whatever. But I think the thing that is okay. I think let me talk around it a little bit before I can get it. This is a really what? Okay, it's a thorny issue to pinpoint here, which is that my understanding of hashgacha pratis and hashgacha klalis is that they're both reality. Okay, and there is a certain seamlessness of it that God relates to the world. In fact, the categories of hashgacha klalis and hashgacha pratis, you'll notice those terms are not used in Tanakh ever. Right, the terms were invented by Rishonim to help us understand stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But it's all just described as like God doing this and God doing that. Okay,
because it's not even Tanakh or Gemara, right?
Or in Chazal. That's right. Or in Chazal. I tracked it down. Someone told me that it was the Ibn Tibones introduced it, but I think someone showed me an earlier source, but definitely not in Gemara. So what do you call it? In the same way that God doesn't actually have 13 midos, harachamim, but we call it that because it helps us to understand the dark of Hashem. God doesn't have many midos, right? It's just a way of us framing it, right? So too with hashgacha pratis and hashgacha klalis. And what I think the people who have this idea of hashgacha pratis have is like it's almost like you're engaging in a world that's completely outside of reality and rationality and chachma, and the more you like escape into that world, then the more you're going to get results in this world, in other words, it's like the more I like ignore, let's say like in the case that you just gave, the more I ignore planning and thinking about the future and cause and effect in the physical world and like retreat into this world where I'm just hoping and striving.
Like planning spiritually only.
I don't even know if you use the word, I don't even know if you use the word planning, right? Because planning means like coming up with like a series of means that are coordinated to get to an end. It's more like just trusting or hoping, the more you indulge in that, then the more you're just going to get this result magically, like poof,
Translate into the physical planning.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So I think that's what is dangerous about that idea is that a person, the more you embrace that idea, the more you are retreating from chachma and decision making and engaging in the bria and you're turning away from you're using your telling Elohim to understand God's world and you're retreating into a wish world. In fact, that's no, that's not a relevant quote. Yeah. So whereas actual hashgacha, my understanding is there are certain things not in your control and certain factors that you don't know, in any given situation, right? Let's say the famous case of Yaakov meeting with Esav, right? So he thought Esav was going to kill him, right? So he didn't know how Esav felt, and he can't control Esav. So what does he do? He comes up with the plan of sending the gifts and the tributes to appeal to Esav's honor, and he strategically spaces them out so it appears more. Yeah. He splits his camp on his own camp on the possibility that half of his entire family is going to get killed, right? And then he turns to God. So there, what you're doing is you are actually doing everything that is in your power to do, right. And then saying that God is the only one who can help you in the areas not in your control, and you're appealing to God for that. So that is taking the opposite direction. That's maximizing your involvement in using chachma and rational decision making, and then acknowledging that God is ultimately in control of the outcomes and turning to Him for help. So that's the difference of the two drachim. Yeah. So that was your first question of what exactly the issue is, and then that's also answering your second question. Yeah, sure.
I think that it's also important when you're engaging in the stuff which is within your control, mm-hmm. to recognize that it's within your control because God gave it to you.
That's also true. Correct. Yeah. Right.
You need to have the idea that God is a partner within you doing this all the way through, that all of it is
exactly. That's a good point. Right. That God is the one who gave you the bechira and the mind and the ability to interact with the world. Right. It's not your own. Your own doing. Right.
Clarify, when people say, "Oh, I'm going to be doing my Hishtadlus," whatever it is. So you're saying that when they say that, it's not like they're planning the physical world, they're just retracting into.
I'm not saying that in every case. I'm saying that I've seen that a lot when people talk about this idea of Hishtadlus, and I would not be surprised. This part I won't record. Hold on just a second. Let me use this to answer your third question, which is how should you bring this to her attention? I think what you should do, I think the derech, if you're going to get a person to go from that childish idea of Hishtadlus to the correct idea, I think what you should do is point to examples of the avos and of the chachamim in the Masorah engaging in the correct form of Hishtadlus. Like with Yaakov, right? Yaakov did not just sit around doing nothing. He did the rational plans. Or my favorite example really is Yocheved. This is what the Rambam says.
I was going to say Avram also, the Sarah, right?
Avram,
according to Chazal, is it Pshat or Chazal that he puts her in a box?
That is the Chazal. Yeah.
It really starts thinking about.
Let me use a simpler example, which does involve putting someone in a box. Yocheved and Moshe, right? So, so Yocheved. So this is the Rambam's. I'm just going to read this one inside, just to show you with your own eyes here.
But it's a different example though. It's you put her on the sea.
Yeah. Rabag in the Toalos of Yocheved says, sorry, in the Toalos about Yocheved. So he says, wait a minute. This is not in Yocheved is in Perek Sheni, right? Yeah. And this will be the thing we end on today. Yeah, here we go. So he says, again, Rabag's Toalos are what he like at the end of the parsha where he brings out the lessons that you learn. So he says, Toalos Harishon hu b'mios v'hu she'ein royal adam she'rashal Hishtadlus v'hatzala l'fi ma she'efshar. Okay, so it's proper for a person to not be lax in Hishtadlus in for salvation according to as much to what is possible. He'll spell out now what Hishtadlus is. Even in cases, even if the like the threat is in a thing is in a manner where he thinks that it is not likely that he'll be saved. Okay. Halotir, don't you see? Ki aim Moshe, that the mother of Moshe, kasher ra'asa shlo yachla od lahatzvin bana, when she saw that she can no longer conceal her son, lo nisrashlu yedeha mipnei zeh mishtadol b'hatzalaso lefi ma she'efshar la. She was not lax in striving to save him as much as possible. Ulazeh, and for this reason, sama oso besuf al sfas hayor, she placed him in the reeds on the banks of the Nile. Toch hateva, in an ark, asher hiskina lo shimalid ba, that she prepared for him to escape, to make him escape miskanas hatvia, from sinking. Vateva haisa nisteres toch hagami, and the ark was hidden in the reeds, asher sham, that were there, kadesh lo yirei osa adam, to conceal it from being seen by people. The afal pish lo haya yachal lachayo sham bzulos mazon, even though he's not going to be able to live there without food. Right, he's going to starve to death. Right, she's delaying his death. Right, if the Egyptians find him at home, they'll kill him on the spot. She puts him in the basket. He might die, but it'll be there's going to be a time in between. Maybe in that time span, he will find help from that Sarah. Or she can go and like nurse him there. And that's why she stationed his sister near him to see what was going to happen. Because maybe she will find there a way to like help him through her good hishtadlus, that he won't be harmed. So the idea is like this. Yocheved's like, okay, if I keep Moshe at home, there's a 99% chance that he will be killed, 100% maybe. And if I put him in the basket, then maybe there's a 90% chance that it'll be killed, right? But what's better, right? 100% chance or not? So you go for you play to your outs, as we say in exactly. It is a I guess this is part of what a Hail Mary is. I don't really know sports analogies enough, but it's a little bit ironic. It's a rational. But again, in Magic the Gathering, I know is you play to your outs, which means that you ask yourself, what if I can win? What would be the way that I can win? And even if the probability is small, you don't concede, right? You don't just give up. You play to that out. That's like Hishtadlus. And I had forgotten that he uses the word Hishtadlus. So it's like a good raya if you're gonna. Yeah. So the answer to your question is, is you find examples like this and show, because people who have this idea have allegiance to the Torah and to Chazal, and they want to emulate them. And if you show this is how Yaakov did his Hishtadlus, this is how Yocheved did it, you can get them to that. Esther's another good example. Okay, let's stop for today. All right, good questions as always. Okay.
Thank you.